Pattern Sculptor is a sculpting and editing software tool for 3D relief carving patterns. This allows for quick and intuitive smoothing, smudging, and adding or removing details to prepare patterns for carving. Let's familiarize ourselves with the workspace a little bit first. To start off, we can launch Designer 3 and we can access Pattern Sculptor through our favorites folder in Designer 3. So if I double click on a pattern, it will open Pattern Sculptor. Now I can also access Pattern Sculptor from the File menu, launch Pattern Sculptor here, if I just want to launch it without a pattern already in there. I can also launch Pattern Sculptor directly from its own launch icon on my desktop or in my program files. Okay, with Pattern Sculptor open, it displays our pattern here in a three-dimensional view. We've got our cube here to orient. I can double click on the Z, snap it back to the front there. Let's just talk about some of the toolbars that are available here first. The first thing we see when we bring in a pattern is the import file or the import dialog. This allows you to do some initial manipulation to the piece if you want to make some quick edits before you get into the main editing window. If it comes in upside down, you can flip it. If you want to invert it and make it inside out pattern, you can use the invert tool there to make it inside out. The preview, I'll show you that in a minute. Smooth keeps transparency. This actually preserves the edge integrity of the pattern, so if I apply like a smooth, the edge can actually seep past the barrier there. If I keep smooth transparency, it keeps the edge clipped to where the original pattern edge was, and this is where the preview can come in handy as well. If I apply this smooth and I turn the preview off, I can toggle back between what it originally looked like and then now with my smooth on it. I can also lower the pattern if I want to. If it's got a background around it, like a rectangular shape from my scan, or if it was a logo or something, I can just drop that background out with the lower tool. And then I've also got this Z scale over here, which allows me to increase height if I want to make the pattern taller or shallower, depending on what it is that you want to do. Once you've finished with these simple little edits here, you can hit accept and just move to the next window. And this gets you into the editing tools dialog. Before we get into those, let's talk a little bit about these other tools that we see up here. First, we have our file menu here. And this allows us to load patterns directly in if we have something else that we want to bring in that's not from our favorites folder. You can load in OBJ files, STLs, JPEGs, PNGs, bitmaps, and a couple formats here that are used only with Pattern Sculptor. You can also save your files there, and SCP is the file type that you will save out of Pattern Sculptor with. That's the native file that you can open back into Pattern Sculptor and continue editing if you need to stop or save the file for some reason. You can open the most recent file, and then we also have the About section here, which is where you'll get your computer ID, which you'll need for licensing the software. You also have up here an undo and redo button, which can also be accessed through Control Z for undo and Control Y for redo. We've got our zoom to all, which allows you, if you're zoomed way in working on something, you want to zoom out quickly, you can click that button and it'll zoom it back out. You can also use the shortcut key F just by pushing the F button, and that will also zoom you back out. And then you've got a quick open last project quick launch there. So those are those tools. We also have our view tools here, which are the same standard tools that we have in Project Designer and our other software. You can rotate, pan, and zoom, which you can also do with just the mouse. So the middle button on your mouse, where the scroll wheel is, if you press that down, you can rotate your object. If you want to pan, you just hold the shift button and the right mouse click, and you can pan the object back and forth and however around you want. And then of course zooming is just the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. We also have up here the light position. You can change the angle of where the light is hitting the model, and this can be really useful sometimes because some of these shadows can be deep and maybe you're missing some details in that area and you want to flip the light around so that you can see what that area looks like. So those are those basic tools. And then we have the materials tab here, and this actually allows you to change the color of the surface you're working on. Now, different colors can help you see things differently in different situations. I prefer to work with this obsidian preset. The coloring of it isn't too harsh on my eyes, and it really highlights the textures and details in the model that are what I'm wanting to clean up and edit in here. You can also create your own. You have this options to change the intensity of the light, and then you can change the colors in here, and you can make all kinds of weird looking designs. And then just by hitting clone here, you can create your very own, name it whatever you want, and then save that, and then it'll just add that to the list. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that, go back to my obsidian preset. Okay, so that's these basic tools that are up here. Let's talk a little bit about these options over here. So each of these tools up here are basically a brush in a way. So you see the red circle on the screen. This is the area that I'm going to be affecting with whatever one of these tools I have selected. Now these over here are the adjustments for those tools. So right now I'm selected on smooth, and tool size does exactly what it says. It's going to change the size of the tool. So now I made it bigger, and then I can make it much smaller. Now there's a shortcut for this tool as well. If I'm working and I hold down the Alt button on my keyboard and use the scroll wheel on the mouse, I can scroll the brush size larger or smaller. If I hold down the Shift button and the Alt button, I can actually do it much faster because it'll skip 10 steps at a time. So I can very quickly get to the brush size I want. Now the next one is tool strength, and this is basically going to affect the intensity of whatever the tool does, how it's applied. So the higher the tool strength, the more intense that application is going to be applied. So in the case of smooth, with a very high tool strength, when I apply that, it's going to smooth a lot. And with a much lower tool strength, it's going to be a much more subtle type of smoothing operation, one that's going to be a lot more controllable. So depending on what it is that you're wanting to do, and then again I can use my Control Z to undo. Tool strength can also be controlled through a shortcut. By holding down the Control button, I can adjust that slider. So when I'm moving around and editing this model and I need to adjust that tool strength, I can hold down the Control button and just scroll to the position I want. And also by holding down the Control and Shift button, I can make that skip those 10 steps and move a lot faster. Okay, next we've got the tool hardness slider, and this one can be adjusted to either a really hard edged brush or a very soft edged brush. So if you want to feather something in with a nice soft edge, or if you really want to deposit material down and make it very defined, then a harder edge might be more useful there. Then down here we've got keep transparency. Now just like the preserve transparency on the previous import tab there, the smooth keeps transparency, this keep transparency is going to do the same thing, but it's going to apply to all the tools. So if I'm depositing material down or something and I want to preserve this edge, this will keep me from painting into this transparent background area. Now if I turn that off, it'll freely let me paint into this area. So if I want to add some more grapes on here or something, it'll let me do that with keep transparency turned off. So we'll keep that on for now. Mode is a way of affecting the tool in an either upward or lowering way. So if I'm, for instance, using my smooth here, I can, with raise, instead of it removing a lot of material while it's smoothing, it's going to be actually kind of adding some material there and kind of raising raising up rather than lowering down. Lowering will have the opposite effect. It'll smooth while lowering and not worrying about removing information there while it's doing that. Normal is just a kind of an in-between. It doesn't really try to affect the height of the piece. It just does a smooth without raising it or lowering it. Decay length is the length with which the tool is applied. So it's kind of like a tapering off. So if I use my brush and I stroke it across here, you can see how it's more smooth on this end, and then it kind of tapers out there. So you can adjust that length however you want. And on most tools, it's by default off unless you want to turn it on, except for the smudge tool. We'll cover that next. The smooth tool paths, this is actually like a drawing assist, and we'll demonstrate it more in a little bit. But the nature of these types of brushes, when you're moving around like this, sometimes it can be kind of hard to follow a curve or a line or something. So say we're wanting to follow this line in here and kind of redefine it. Well, tracing over that can get rather tricky holding your mouse steady. So the smooth tool pass allows you to from a starting point to an ending point, even if you kind of deviate a little bit, it's going to attempt to smooth out that curve and create a nice smooth path rather than a really jagged one. So it's a really useful assist in trying to help you get a nice smooth stroke out of using these brushes. And that one I use quite often, and we'll demonstrate that in a little bit. Okay, so now we're kind of familiar with how they adjust, and let's now actually see what all of these tools do. The smooth tool obviously smooths, and we've already been playing around with that one a little bit. You can use it as a brush to select just certain areas to smooth and brush it over those areas. Like these grapes, it's got that kind of stippled graininess to it in this pattern, and grapes should be smooth. They're nice and smooth surface round things, so let's make sure those are really nice and smoothed out. And then even these leaves, even though the leaves we want to retain some texture to those, we can still do some smoothing, maybe reduce the strength here and just give it a little bit to try to remove a little bit of that grainy texture from the initial scan. This was scanned with the scanning probe initially, so it's got some texture to it. Alright, so that's the smooth tool. The smudge tool is a really useful tool. It actually will take an area and kind of drag it across the board. So if I have a selected area that I want to affect, we'll turn the strength on just to really show what it does. If I want to take this and I want to drag that across here, it's going to select that information at that height, and then it's going to drag it across. Now it's got the decay length, so it's going to kind of taper out here, and you can adjust how much it tapers out. So in certain situations, like if I want to pull some information over to this edge, or I want to crease something a little bit more, if I have like the raise here, we can kind of pull out this edge a little bit. So it's it can be extremely useful in defining certain areas. The deposit tool is basically our paintbrush, our additive paintbrush. So it allows you to draw lines or shapes really, and the intensity is going to increase with strength on how you do that, and then also the profile will change based on what kind of hardness you have set for that. So there's a lot of possibilities for that, so you can literally go and draw and add material onto this. If I keep transparency off, we can kind of show how those brushes look. Much lower strength, lower hardness, and you really get a variety of different types of shapes that you can create with that. I'll undo that. Sealing is actually a tool used to prevent your additive, whatever you're adding to it, from going above whatever the highest point of your pattern is. So if I am drawing on here and I've got a certain area I don't want to go above, especially if I'm just trying to fill in an area, I can maintain a floor. So a lot of times for filling holes and things like this is really useful because it's not going to go above the height of the hole. So that's what the sealing checkbox is for there. The remove tool is just the opposite of the deposit, in that it actually will cut away material and kind of gouge and or sculpt in there. And just like the others, you can increase or decrease the intensity and tool size. So if you want to get a nice soft edge and a subtle shape here, you can actually kind of lower that and just kind of help define in some of these details that may not be detailed enough. You see how my line's kind of squiggly there? Let's go ahead and turn that smooth tool paths on and have it assist me in making that curve smooth. You can see how much smoother that line is there. And then the floor checkbox on the remove tool works the same as the sealing, just the opposite. If I'm removing an area and I don't want it to go all the way to the bottom like an eraser, I can have it prevent me from erasing too far down. So that's what the floor is. It's basically preservation of the lowest point of your pattern. So the undo brush is a really nice tool that allows you to selectively undo certain areas. So if I got a certain point into this piece and then I realized, well, I want to redo a section that I did 20 steps ago, you can go and selectively just undo that area without having to undo everything. So this can be really useful, and it'll undo it all the way back to its original state. So it's not going to allow you to save different states, but it'll allow you to get back to your starting point so that you can go and reapply whatever the edit is that you wanted to do to that area. And then the erase tool is simply an erase tool. It works just by erasing whatever you want to brush around, and the only real edit for that is just the size of your eraser. Okay, so that is basically an outline of all of our tools. So let's go ahead and really do something with this pattern now. So the first thing, we're going to go ahead and apply that smooth that we had before to our grapes. Try to get those nice and smoothed out. Increase our strength here with the control, holding down the control button. I can increase that strength maybe about mid-level, and go ahead and almost polish and shine these grapes up because we want them to look like grapes. Okay, then with the deposit tool, I'm going to go here and then holding down the Alt button, I can increase my brush size to kind of fit those grapes. And then I'm just going to kind of paint on those, and you'll see how that raised up that area. So it makes my grapes actually grape shaped, kind of rounded. And I can go through all of these grapes and just adjusting my brush size to fit each grape, kind of give them all a little bit of a rounding treatment until I get all of them looking and behaving more like grapes. And you can do a little bit more, a little bit less on some of them to try to help give it a sense of depth so that they're not all just on the exact same level. as the pattern, the flat pattern, kind of did. It really seemed like these were grapes that got run over by something. We can make this look a lot more interesting. So we can go through and do all those grapes. We can visit those later. Let's go and explore some other tools here and some other edits that we can make to this thing. So we played around with the smudge a little bit in there, and I kind of pulled out some of these edges. And I look at these leaves and I kind of see three leaf groups. There's a one here behind, then this one in the middle, and then there's this one on top. But they really lose a lot of definition here, and these edges are so soft. So if I use that smudge tool in the raised mode there, I can kind of pull out these edges a little bit. And try to help define those sections a little bit better. And a little bit of editing that, and I could probably even use the same tool here, but in the lower mode, to come in and kind of help define some of these little points in here and push in some of those details a little bit more defined. So this helps us kind of create some of those separations there by just using the data that's already there and pulling it over to our edges, so that we can kind of almost creating a crease there that helps really define those edges. Alright. Let's use the deposit tool to kind of finish out some of this type of operation that we're doing here. With the deposit tool, we kind of see this stem coming up out of the grapes, and then it kind of goes into this blobby mass that doesn't have any real definition. What if we took that stem there, and let's turn on our smooth tool paths. Let's kind of draw a stem in here. It gives us something to work from that allows us to kind of create something that make these leaves attach better to that. We can use the same tool to kind of help define that edge a little bit more. So create those connections for where the leaves are attached to the stem. And using that smooth tool path that kind of helped me give a little bit smoother curve there. And of course we've got that undo, so anytime something doesn't look right, go ahead and just undo it. There, that's a little bit smoother curve. So this doesn't look like much other than a few lines that I've kind of piled onto here. This is where the smooth tool really becomes the secret weapon of this software. With the smooth tool, I can use it to blend things very nicely in. So I can just take that whole shape there and kind of adjust it or feather it into that leaf shape and actually make it be part of it rather than just a bump on the edge. And I can even use like the rays to kind of help bring up some of that smooth detail that I'm working on in there. It kind of preserves the higher end of that edge there. So we can go through and smooth all of these rather quickly. Put that back on normal. So now we have a little bit more definition to it. We still need to do quite a bit more. Now that we've got this weird shape behind the stem here, we can go ahead and use the eraser tool and just kind of cut that shape out. Kind of really define in where this stem is. And when I come along edges and I want to be really careful, I just usually do one click with the mouse rather than trying to drag it. That way I can much more carefully pay attention to where the brush is going and how it's erasing and what it's erasing, because I don't want to go too far. Alright, so now there's a stem, much more well defined there, and the leaves all seem to have their separations. We can keep working with that. We can blend in these edges here with the smooth tool. Give those a nice blended smooth. Help it define itself a little bit more. Well, we've got some definition happening here, so let's go ahead and switch to our remove tool. And let's go ahead and start trying to sculpt in some of these details that we're seeing. We can follow these curves, try to give them some more definition. Don't be afraid to use that undo tool if you don't quite get the line the way you want it. Okay. Now let's maybe make the brush a little smaller. Add some veins into the leaves here. We can add as much detail as we want into this. And we can continue on doing this and then adding more definition all the time. And we can start to see some nice definition going on here. And after a while, then we've got lots of details in here. We've got some nicely defined leaves there, and a stem, and our grapes are nicely rounded. I can even come through here and help create a little bit more defining lines in between the grapes with my remove tool. And we've got quite a drastic change to our pattern with some simple set of tools and just a little bit of brush strokes. And now we can save this back to our pattern designer and are ready to carve it. So the next tab here to work with is the export tab. We've got some different options on how we can export this model. So just like we can import in STLs and OBJs, we can also export out as an OBJ and STL. And we've got different quality settings for that. Best is going to be a lossless saving. It's not going to compress it at all. But high, medium, and draft are different levels of how much reduction in the geometry it's going to create. And mostly that's for making smaller files. Export to PTR is just a raw pattern format, so it's a PTN file with all of the user information stripped out. So PTN files, always remember who the user was that created them, and so makes them difficult for editing between other people. PTR is a raw format that doesn't contain any of that information. They can be freely traded. And when they open up in Designer, though, they will become a PTN, and then they will be marked as one that you have created. Send to Designer does exactly that. You click on that, and it will send it right back to your favorites folder. And you can give it a name and save it in there, and then can place it on the board. So we can place both of these here side by side to get a nice comparison as to the changes we've made. So that is Pattern Sculptor. Let's go ahead and load one other file in here just to demonstrate another aspect of this. So I'm going to load an STL file. So when you load an STL or an OBJ file, you have a little bit different initial import window, because it allows you to orient the model, because sometimes models are turned around sideways and things. So you can do that, and you can also scale it, because right now this is 205 inches tall, which is a little excessive, and it's even telling me here that's too big. It's not going to be able to process that very well. So you can scale it down. One quick way to do that is just to change the imported dimensions. So it's looking at 205 millimeters now, and then this working dimension is still inches, and that makes it about 8 inches tall. That's a lot more decent to work with. You can still bring in rather large files, though. I think I could probably still make this about 40-50 inches tall if I wanted to, but this is an acceptable size for me to work in for now. Okay, so when I bring it in here, there's the model as we'd expected, until we turn it to the side, and we can see that it's made it only from one direction here, from that direction we oriented to, and it's really tall. So the first thing we're going to want to do is lower it down. And then we can use that Z-scale to shallow the whole thing up. So maybe we want to make this like a regular type CarveWright pattern where it's shallowed. I can carve it into kind of a regular size board. So So instead of making it a full 3D model, I can very quickly make it a relief model. Maybe even shallow it up a little bit more than that. And then I can hit accept, and then I've got all the same tools that I had previously that I can go in and edit things. So I can go in and do things like, let's make this smaller, define these eyes a little bit better. And of course, spend as much time getting their details right as you can. So you pretty much are unlimited on how much and the type of things you can really edit with this. Start to give her a little iris or an eye here. With the remove tool, we can go in and put in a little pupil there, and then we can kind of smooth that out. And quickly add in some details like that. And on the lips and in the nose here with the smudge tool, this would be a good place to kind of define the inside of that nose a little bit just by pushing out that area. It works really well for kind of creating creased areas. And then maybe with the remove tool, go in here and actually try to define the lips a little bit better. Let's reduce our strength. Go in here and add some definition to the lips. Some of those lines that we all have on our lips. So there's some quick and easy things you can do to pretty much any model to really add and just bring out a lot of details that are in them often. We can add another eye over here and we can turn this into something completely different. Okay, that's Pattern Sculptor. I hope you enjoy.